Hi, I'm Elise Winters, and I'm a Suzuki violin teacher in Austin, Texas. And I want to talk about two different types of staccato and the difference between ballistic and controlled motion, and how knowing this difference and teaching it to your students can help them to have both a better staccato and a better legato. So before we talk about this, I want to talk about two other things. One is a notion called proprioception. And proprioception is your physical awareness of your body's position in space as well as the exertion of your muscles. We're taught in school, and your students are taught in school, that we have five senses. Proprioception is the very important sixth sense and is the sense that we use the most in playing violin, because we shouldn't be using our eyes very much to play violin. It's a very weird angle. Anything that we need to see, we can't see very clearly. And the feedback that we get from our ears is really after the fact. So it's our proprioceptive sense that allows us to have direct, in the moment, on-board control of everything we do on the violin. As we tune into our own physical experience of playing the violin, and as we guide our students to do this, one of the first things that we notice is that our arm is both an active mover and it's also a passive object. So it can get itself from point A to point B, but I can also rest it on something, and you can feel the weight of the arm, and I can throw it up in the air, and in the moment that it's being thrown, it's moving itself, but after that, I'm releasing those muscles and allowing it to continue its flight as an object and have a natural deceleration, which is caused by gravity. And then, of course, at that point, I can either suspend it there or I can allow it to naturally fall, again using gravity. So your arm has ballistic properties in that moment. In other words, it's acting like a ball. It doesn't have its own engine on board. You're throwing it. And a lot of what we do on the violin uses this ballistic motion. Now, because you've been playing violin for a long time, you don't notice that you're doing this, but when your students have a hard time bringing their staccato to a clean stop, what's happening is they're motoring, so to speak, their arm the whole time, and then it kind of jiggles as it comes to a stop. And what we do as advanced players, when we do a staccato, we're doing an initial impulse at the beginning of the staccato, and then we're allowing the deceleration to happen naturally. So I'm engaging the muscles only for an instant. Besides the jiggly stop at the end of the staccato, there's another reason that using muscles all the way through the bow stroke doesn't work well. And that's that if you're using muscles all the way through that staccato stroke, you have to also use muscles to stop the stroke. So then both pairs of muscles are engaged at the same time, the ones that were used to create the staccato and the ones that are used to stop it, which is the opposite muscle group. So now your arm is in a locked position, held isometrically between these two muscle groups. Not all staccato is necessarily going to be ballistic motion. If we have a piece that you really want to create a sense of energy, then you would use the ballistic movement, where you're throwing out your bow. But if you have a piece that's more sedate, then you would probably use a controlled motion, where there might be a small element of ballistic movement, kind of using inertia to come to a stop, but in general you are actually moving the arm all the way through that note so that it's a steady bow speed. As I introduce this concept to my students, I really like to do it away from the violin first, so that they can experience kind of the sensation of gravity acting on their arm. And sometimes I'll bring in analogies like swinging on a swing set or driving around a curve in a car to help them remember a sense of what gravity feels like acting on their body, so they can then relate that to their physical experience of playing. The next step is experiencing those sensations on the violin. And when I introduce this, I like to do it through some really simple exercises where there's no distraction of notes and bowings and fingerings. I like to do down bow first, because on down bow the arm can be more passive, because gravity really is carrying the bow a little distance for you until friction brings you to a stop. And so the exercise that I use, I like to do 3 notes in a row, all going the same direction, and I call it strawberry pie. We do this in third position, by the way. My students start out in third position. And the return up bow can be as long as it needs to be, as long as it takes to get back to the starting point on the bow. It doesn't matter if it's the same length every time. And one of the things that I call their attention to is listening for the silence in between the notes, because of course the other thing that makes a good staccato, besides a clean stop, is actually being paused on the string for a moment, and that's what creates that sense of clarity in a good staccato bow stroke. Once they've gotten good at strawberry pie, there's a fun exercise that I introduce with some of my students, and we call this one duck, 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 goose. And on this exercise, they actually get to choose the number of notes that they put on the down bows, and it's a great opportunity for them to experience a little bit of very safe improvisation, and also to learn the relationship between how long your bow length is and how many notes you're fitting on a bow, and to start making those calculations for themselves. So here's an example of duck, duck, goose. And they have a good time seeing how many notes they can fit on a bow. And the only rule is that all of the notes have to be clean and clear. So they can't have any notes that don't have a good tone quality, or it doesn't count. The last bow stroke that I want to talk with you about uses a Martelé bow stroke. And I never understood the obsession, if you will, of the old technique books for teaching Martelé to beginners until recently. And what I've discovered is that when you have a very beginning player use Martelé, what happens is that they can't micromanage their bow direction. They can't make sort of in the moment adjustments to their bow direction, and so they have to get that bow angle correct from the very beginning. And so it sort of forces the issue. And what I've found is when I introduce this with my beginning students, they suddenly have an incredible leap in their ability to play with straight bowing. So the exercise is called gooseberry pie. When they do the Martelé, it's going to be obviously a fast bow speed. The weight of the bow will be very light, and I'm not expecting them to have a great sound on the Martelé. It's going to be kind of an airy sound, and it's for that reason that some teachers call it a poof bow. And really the point is just to experience that ballistic movement of the arm and to be able to calculate that bow angle correctly from the very beginning. So here's gooseberry pie. In the next video, we'll talk about helping your students to play better in tune. And some of the things that we'll discuss are why your students may not be hearing themselves even when they think they're listening to themselves and even when you think they are. We'll talk about how playing in tune really involves a collaboration among several senses, including vision, hearing, and inner hearing, and how to fine-tune this arrangement. We'll also talk about whether to use finger tapes or not and why. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please take a moment and register to the right of this so that you get an email when the next video is released, and also make sure to go back to the forum where you originally saw this video and leave a comment so that other teachers can also benefit. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.